What's up YouTube, and welcome back to the race car life. So we're here with the DC5, of course, and we got something exciting for you, and that's that we got the turbocharger mounted temporarily, so we can kind of get an idea of what we're working with, as well as kind of get the mounting tabs built up and get the exhaust fabbed up. So got the mounting bracket. We got a temporary mounting bracket running to the strut tower bolt. That's 1/8" flat bar steel. This is just kind of temporary. As you can see, we're running a little bit tight into the wire harness here. So I'm gonna try to squeeze this part, the what they call the pedestal of this turbocharger. I'm gonna try to squeeze the pedestal a little bit further over, and I think we're gonna tweak the angle just a little bit on this, and I'll add one or two more support brackets onto the pedestal to help support this turbo. And yeah, so now we're gonna have to pull the wire harness, and we're gonna have to pull at least those two tabs off the wire harness so we can run it down a little closer to the steering rack to be able to make room for the manifold. I'm going to have to reroute our brake booster vacuum line. That needs to get up and out of the way because it goes to this little metal crossover pipe, and then right here in the way, and a couple other little vacuum and evap lines we're going to have to move. And then we have our primary fuel line, and our primary fuel line needs to get relocated. So that's actually coming down here, and then it crosses up and has a little bit of a bend in here that gives it room for the motor to rock. So we're gonna reroute this fuel line completely, get it up and out of the way of the manifold, and run it back around. The last thing we want is a gas fire. And heater core hoses down here. So our heater core hoses we need to lengthen and route down and up and out of the way. So anything we don't want exposed to heat, we either need to get completely away from the area or we need to have below it. So we're going to route the heater core lines below the manifold piping and pretty close to the steering rack there. Loop it. It's pretty common on our Sexus for them to do that with a typical full race Sidewinder kit. I'm thinking that our power steering hose will be okay temporarily. As you know, we're going to be deleting it, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to put a heat shield up in here right over the manifold to protect everything, and put heat shields everywhere I can. So in the next coming episodes, you're going to see the wire harness. The wire harness itself is going to get tucked. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like yet, but stay tuned for future episodes and kind of watch and see what we do with it. Should be pretty cool. Heater core hoses are going to get rerouted. Not necessarily a tuck, but they are going to get rerouted. So that might not get a special episode. And fuel line will be getting tucked. So fuel line, brake booster line, and wire harness are all going to get tucked. We're going to have to make room because we got to run a 3" downpipe right off of this flange. All my flat bar steel for making the flange metal should be here tomorrow. So if I don't see it tomorrow, I'll see it in the next couple days. Then I'll cut out my flanges for both the downpipe as well as the uppipe inlets for the turbocharger. So I'll cut those flanges out, and then we can start getting our pipe made. So we're going to be pairing up cylinders 1 and 4 and 2 and 3. And cylinders 1 and 4 and 2 and 3 are going to have their own separate pipes that go into separate inlets on the twin scroll turbocharger. We're going to have to plumb our turbo for the coolant. So we're going to have to plumb it full of oil. We're going to have to drain it. We're going to have to got a lot of work to do between tapping the pan and we already have oil feed ran. That's what I'm doing here today. We have oil feed that goes to our oil pressure gauge, and we have the stock oil pressure switch, which is just teed into the T-fitting, and that's grounded so it can still function. I'm actually having a leak right now with my high pressure line back here. I'll give a flashlight so you can see. So if you look down there on the oil filter, you see on that line before that hose, it'll shine the light where it's really bright. That hose is our oil pressure feed, and it's actually leaking right off the fitting. It's a high pressure push on fitting, so it has 3 notches. It has to get pushed all the way on, and it's actually 1 notch short of 3 notches, so it's dripping down just a little bit. That's a double ply 200 psi hose, and that's a 200 psi fitting, and I haven't been seeing 200 psi on oil pressure, so it shouldn't be leaking in any way. But when I had it up on the rack doing the exhaust, I noticed it wasn't quite pushed on all the way, and that's why it's leaking out. So I need to get that tightened up so we can keep our oil pressure up high and keep our VTEC engagement at full lock. So that's what I'm going to be doing here today, tightening that up. So I'm going to tighten that up, and I want to see what the variance in our oil pressure is that we see on the gauge. So yeah, so this is a little bit of where we are now. So I'm going to be redoing the mounts on this, as I said. So I'm going to redo the mounts, add more, change the rotation a little bit. Once I have this mounted where I want it to be mounted, I'm going to go ahead and start making the pipe that's going to go to the manifold, get the bends all set up right, and I'm going to start tucking everything as soon as we can. So I'm going to start tucking all of our booster lines, fuel lines, wire harness, everything. We got to make room, got to run the pipe, and as soon as I have the pipe mocked up to exactly where I want it to be, we're going to pull the header off, we're going to cut it off the flange, and we are going to re-weld the flange and make our sidewinder kit and the dump pipe in one single day, as well as build the drain for the turbo and the feed for the turbo and run coolant lines, and we'll at least have the exhaust side of the turbocharger hooked up. So that way we don't have to worry about that anymore, and the only thing left would be the intake side. And if we're just running the exhaust side of the turbocharger, we don't have to worry about plumbing the turbocharger necessarily right away. We can run it open temporarily as long as we put a filter on the turbocharger. So, but the plan is to try to knock everything out in one day, run the intercooler piping and such, and that's going to be a little tight as it has to run basically where the fuse box is down to where the washer bottle is, and down from there. It'd be a lot easier if we did a battery relocation first, but we're not, so yeah, I'm gonna have to run a pretty tight angle through in here and then down through the washer neck, and I'm probably gonna have to cut out a hole for that intercooler piping to go where the washer neck goes, because it's only about 1.5 inch hole, and getting the piping up won't be that bad. Battery really gets everything that much harder, but as you can see, we can get pipe up through here, and it's a little bit of a tight fit, but nonetheless we can get pipe up through here. So yeah, this is where we are in all its glory. We got our fully rebuilt turbo mounted, and it looks sexy. Guys, so I just went to go tighten up the oil feed line that I was telling you about, and it was like loose, like you could just spin it. So I got it pushed back onto the fitting all the way, and I realized why it came loose, and that's that we have a failed hose clamp. So obviously I'm at home and I don't have a whole bunch of hose clamps laying around, so at least not high pressure ones. So I'm gonna pull one of these hose clamps off of this vacuum tee that I have here, and I'm gonna just trade out the hose clamps, and then when I get to work tomorrow I can grab a new hose clamp and throw it on here, and or switch it back around, I don't know. But right now the hose clamp in there just tightens up and then spins free, tightens up, spins free. If you've ever seen a hose clamp fail, that's usually what they do. So I'm gonna swap some hose clamps around and see where we can get from there. Alright guys, so I got the hose clamps swapped over and stuff, but I wanted to show you what I was talking about. So here on the hose clamp you'll see good slots. And you'll see here it's a couple little bent up, and what happens is the hose clamp gets over torqued. That's why they came up with high pressure hose clamps. These are actually low pressure hose clamps, but they should have been fine, but it's got a couple slots on it that got torn up. So got it all fixed away up here. So now if you grab this hose and try to move it, you can see that hose clamp just barely in between the exhaust manifold, and you try to move it, it doesn't move at all. And I really reefed on it trying to make sure that it's on there tight and it doesn't turn, so that's all fixed up down there. So yeah, and if you want to see what kind of fitting I'm talking about, you see here the upper side of it, it's a NPT threaded high pressure push on fitting. you can pick these up. It's kind of like a normal barbed fitting, but the barbs are really sharp and it's a little bit longer than normal. And yeah, so when you run that type of a barb, they're really hard to push on, and you have to use it with the right kind of hose, otherwise it won't work. So this is a high pressure 200 psi hose, dual ply. So yeah, if you're interested in any of that, feel free to comment or email me at the Race Car Life, and I can help guide you on the right path. This is the kind of hose that we're going to be using for the oil feed line as well. I think we're going to get rid of the factory oil pressure switch and just run our feed right off of that. So it should be pretty good. But yeah, so now I'm going to put this crappy hose clamp on the right here, so we can still drive it. I'm going to swap out that hose clamp when we're at work tomorrow. See the difference between a good quality hose clamp and not. You'll see that the typically good quality hose clamps are just a flathead when they're in this small. And you see the laddering on this. See the width of the laddering? So it's just a slight bit thicker on this upper hose clamp, which is a better quality, but the edges of the laddering, the side, is actually a good millimeter wider, I'd say. Maybe not quite. And you see how much that curves to the side when you put it in versus the quality one. It sticks out pretty straight for the most part. And these are under almost the same torque, except for the upper one is under more torque. The bottom one already started slipping. So that should get us to work. That's about it. Alright guys, so we're going to start up the car just an idle to see what kind of a oil pressure difference we see. We have been seeing about 80 psi to 90 psi on a cold start idle, and it should be peaking over 90 psi, I imagine. Right now it might be closer to 80 because it hasn't been too long since we drove the car. So that looks pretty good on the oil pressure there. Went up to a strong 80, and that was a warm start. As you can see, it wasn't like a cold start high rev. It was pretty much idle. So I'd say that was a success. Tomorrow morning I'll have to see exactly what kind of oil pressure we see in a true cold start, and bring it into the shop and get that hose clamp fixed up. So I'm going to have to clean all that area out and get all the oil out of there so I can wash and make sure I don't have another problem with leaking down there in the future. I got the hose clamp that's on there pretty tight. Tight enough to pinch the hose, and it's pretty hard to pinch 200 psi hose. So I don't think we'll have any issues there. Stay tuned, and I'll let you know in the next post how that oil pressure situation turned out. So thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned.